Hi, this is Janine, and I'm going to be giving you some notes on the handout Ripe Figs. It's a short story by Kate Chopin. On the first day of class, you received a bright yellow handout, so get that out, and we'll go page by page. I'll explain the literary terms, and I suggest that you take notes on the yellow handout because you'll be using this information when you analyze the next short story, Two Kinds by Amy Tan. The first item on the page that has the green arrow pointing to it is the pre-reading vocabulary, and they call it structural attack. And basically what they're asking you to do here is look at these words and see if there are any prefixes that you recognize, any suffixes that you recognize, any roots that you recognize. So rather than look up the words in the dictionary, you want to see how much you can get just from looking at the words, kind of breaking it into parts. They did the first three for you. So if you look at number 4, summertime, we can see this is a compound word, the word summer, and then time. The next one is godmother. Once again, we see two words that we can split it into, God, mother. And the last one is plumpest. So here we see plump and then the superlative ending est. So before you read the story, it's a good idea to look at the suggested vocabulary and see how many of these words you already have an idea of what they mean, because you have an idea of what the different parts mean. The next item is the blue arrow, and these are pre-reading questions. And so the suggestion is, before you start reading, you want to have some questions in mind so that you're paying attention to some of the important information. And so we see 5 questions here. Who are the main characters? Who are the supporting characters? What does Babette want? What does Maman want? And what does the title mean? So as you read it the first time, just have these questions in mind so you can have a greater understanding. The last item that I'd like to draw your attention to is with the red arrow. Here, the book is suggesting that as you read, you get involved by underlining and highlighting important information. That way, later, when you have to write about it, you can easily find the important pieces that you need. And so you've got 5 steps here that it's asking you to do. So as you're reading on the next page, you want to complete these 5 steps, circling the names of the characters, underlining the information that lets you know when and where the story began. The third item is to put a number by the major events. The fourth item is to take notes as you're reading. And then the last item is to reread the title, just keeping the title in mind, because there may be clues in the title that can help you understand the story. So here on pages 6 and 7, we see the short story itself. On page 7, we see the story that has been marked as the author suggested, with the characters circled and the information related to the setting being underlined. Also, in the margin on the right-hand side, we see the first 2 significant events are labeled, and then hopefully you added items 3 and 4, and you can see I've added them in red and purple on the right. So this technique of circling the characters and making notes on the page is very useful, because later when you write about it, you can come back and easily find it. On pages 8 and 9, we see the beginning of the journal entries, and the journal entries are what you will be doing for the next story, Two Kinds. So you want to pay attention to this explanation so that you'll do it correctly. The first item is number 1, MLA Works Cited. This is how you record the name of the story, the name of the person who wrote it, and the source where the story was published. So if you look at the top item, it shows the model. It says author's last name, comma, first name, period. And if you look a little farther down, you will see the example of the story Ripe Figs. So we see Chopin, comma, Kate, period, and then notice the story name Ripe Figs is in quotation marks. Stories are in quotation marks and books are underlined. So American 24 Karat Gold is actually the book where the story was published. So you will use the same format when you read Two Kinds. The only difference is you'll have a different page number, and the name of the story and name of the author will be different, but the book, the edition, the editor, Yvonne Cisco, New York, Pearson Longman, 2009, all of that information will be the same for Two Kinds because both stories came from the same book. The second item is related to the characters, and we're talking about the main characters. So within a story, there are characters. The main characters are the ones that have the most important role in the story. And if you look on page 9, there is a discussion here about characters can be either protagonist or antagonist. The protagonist is the one that we're for. The antagonist usually is causing some kind of resistance or conflict for the protagonist. So the antagonist isn't necessarily a bad person, but is creating some sort of conflict. And so if you look at the story Ripe Figs, Babette is the protagonist, but her godmother, Maman, is the antagonist because she is not allowing Babette to do what she wants. So that's kind of a general idea. And so when you read the next story, which is Two Kinds, you want to be thinking about who are the protagonist and who are the antagonists within the story. Okay, so now on page 10 and 11, let's look at the supporting characters and setting. The supporting characters are people in the story that don't play a major role. If they were removed, it wouldn't affect the conflict, it wouldn't affect the drama so much. And so we see the cousins are the supporting characters in Ripe Figs. Number 4, the next item is setting. Setting is about the time and place. Sometimes it's easy to figure out the setting because the writer gives information about the time, or maybe there's a historical event happening that we know about, so we have an idea about the time. Sometimes we just have to guess. For instance, in science fiction, usually we can say that the events of the story take place sometime in the future, but we may not know how far into the future. Knowing the information about the writer and also looking for clues in the story can help us figure out setting. And if you look on the bottom of page 10, there is a description of the information that would allow us to guess that this story takes place somewhere in the South, probably Louisiana because of the French language. That Louisiana is a state in the U.S. where there are dialects of French still spoken. If we look at page 11, it talks about sequence. Sequence are the major events in the story that usually lead to something called the climax. The climax is the point in the story where the tension that is created by the conflicts in the story is finally resolved. And so in the Ripe Figs, our climax is when the figs are finally ripe because now Babette can go and visit her cousins.